Uh, I welcome you, Jagat Mehta ji, for to JB Nagar CP Study Circle program, and we will start our program with the video on ethics. So I am sharing my screen, and we will start the video on ethics. Now I request our study circle member CA Rishabh Chaudhary to formally introduce today's speaker, CA Jagat Mehta.
Good
CA
evening,
Jagat, yeah.
good evening, all the members, and good evening, the speaker. It is my honor to introduce Mr. C. A. Jagat Mehta. He's a chartered accountant and has a decade years of experience in direct tax, international taxation, and exchange regulations. He currently works with BDO, and his prior work experience is KPMG and Graham Thornton. He completed his articleship from Haribhakti under the Global Taxation Service Division. He has been a speaker in the WIRC and the study circles, and he has given inbound presentation in Haribhakti, KPMG, and Graham Thornton during his work time. He has been a core member in the International Taxation and Tax Committee of Bombay Chartered Accountant Society. He has also handled various experiences such as inbound restructuring, NGOs on various foreign contributions, advising banks in relation to various queries made by the NRI, carrying out tax due diligence, and representing corporates in assessment and appellate proceedings. So therefore I request Jagat Mehta to take it forward from here and request all the members to have a good learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishabh, for your kind words. At the outset, I would like to thank Krishna Kumar, Jayesh Thakkar, Seema Mehta, and other conveners of JB Study Circle for giving me an opportunity to speak before this such an augustous gathering. Friends, I'll just share my screen. Good evening, friends. And welcome to this welcome on this Saturday evening. Friends, section while I'll be speaking on section 195, which is pertains to TDS on non-residents. This is a particular section where the TDS to determine whether we should do deduct tax or not, we have to rely on various different sections. So it cannot be section 195 cannot be read in isolation. It has to be read in conjunction with other provisions of the act. Friends, before I get into this particular provision, just a small disclaimer. Uh, yeah. So just like as we go in for a movie and there is always a kind of a disclaimer, a similar disclaimer is over here. The gist of this disclaimer being that any views that I will be giving during this presentation, either during the Q&A session or while we are discussing it, are solely of my own view, and it shall not be views of either JB Nagar Study Circle meetings, Study Circle, or WIRC, or my firm where I'm working with, or BCS, or any other organization that I'm associated with. So this is the crux of this disclaimer. And one more thing, as we all do, being a chartered accountant, is that any view, if we are taking it, since each and every issue depends on each and every different facts, one needs to analyze their own peculiar facts before coming to a particular conclusion. Now, today's agenda is this like today is what we are going to touch upon. A brief overview of section 195. We shall be doing a detailed analysis of section 195.1, followed by 195A, which refers to grossing up of tax. And then we will dwell upon other subsections of 195 and 197. This basically will cover lower withholding provisions. Then we will move to section 206AA and a recently proposed section 206AB, which has been proposed to be inserted by Finance Bill 2021. We will briefly touch upon multilateral instrument MLI as it is known in common parlance. Albeit it would be very briefly we'll be touching up because that itself is a topic in itself. So we'll just briefly touch upon the reason being while this we would be looking at section 195, but MLI will also have an impact when we are doing issuing form 15CB or deducting tax. Then we will move on to 195 subsection 6 read with rule 37BB. Once we are through 195 section, we will also touch upon the refund of taxes withheld. What are the circumstances when the deductor can claim the refund of those taxes? Then as a taxpayer, what are the documentation that needs to be maintained? A kind of a checklist will be just I'll say illustrative list that one needs to keep in mind. And and then we'll be touch upon some issues. These issues are more or less emanating from the judicial precedents, and then we'll be looking at what are the key takeaway from the entire presentation. Friends, I have received a couple of queries, so which we'll be touching up. Some I might take it up while on the slide itself, or I might take it up at the end of the slide, end of the presentation. While we will be going through the presentation, there are certain places where we will be having a kind of discussion, either through chat window or Q&A box. You may provide your answers just to have an interactive session. So now moving ahead, let's understand the basic concept of section 195. So why the section 195? Just like a normal provision of section 194, where again like 194 A, B, C, D, and J, K, L, and all those sections, which is basically to collect the tax at the earliest point of time. Similar is the intention for 195, but an additional point is that this particular provision relates to a non-resident. Had it been the case of a resident, the tax officer always had recourse to connect with or rather collect the money from the deductee also. But when it comes to a non-resident, the tax officer does not have a recourse. He may not have a recourse because there is going to be an extra jurisdictional and the extra territorial which would be involved, and then they will have to connect with the counterparts and then get the taxes recovered. And hence, this 195 plays a very pivotal role. Second reason is they have given by asking us to file form 15CB. By that, they are in fact gathering the information about the foreign remittances which are happening. Unlike section 194, if we see, those are applicable when any payment as referred in that particular section is covered, whereas section 195 will get attracted the moment any sum chargeable to tax. Again, another differentiating aspect is that in section 194, when I say 194, I'll put it the other way around, the domestic tax, TDS. Generally, we have a cap which is given in case 30,000, 50,000 to 180, as the case may be, 50 lakhs in case of 194 IA. When it comes to 195, there is no cap prescribed. So anything that we will be paying it could be liable for tax withholding. This is applicable to all the taxpayer. And as I earlier mentioned a couple of minutes back, 195 has to be read with the other provisions of the Act. Apart from that, DTAA. While when we are reading at DTAA, we'll also now have to look into MLI, since MLI is now very much alive when it comes to India. Of course, when we'll come on the MLI particular slide, I'll just briefly touch upon what are the factors that we need to look into it. Uh, in the event assessee does not withhold taxes under 195, tax officer is required to determine the income component involved in the sum on which tax withholding is to be computed, and the payer to be considered as in default for non-withholding of taxes only with respect to of those income component. He cannot be held responsible for the entire component. So this was clarified by CBDT through instruction number 2 of 2014. Section 195 contains 7 subsections. Subsection 1 speaks about scope and condition of applicability. Subsection 2 talks about low withholding application that can be made by the payer. 3 talks about pay to the application by the payee to the tax officer for low tax withholding certificate. 4 talks about what will be the validity of certificate issue. 5 talks about CBDT's power to issue notification. 6 talks about what are the information relating to payments that needs to be provided. And last, subsection 7 gives the authority of CBDT to specify class of persons who shall make application under 195 subsection 2. Now let's understand section 195.1. Because friends, entire provision rather is revolving under 195.1, and there have been lots of litigations which are revolving under tax withholding requirement under 195. So let's understand this section 195 subsection 1. What I have done is I have reproduced the entire section so that it's easier. I may not take you through the entire section like proviso, and explanation. So I'll first touch upon subsection 1, which reads any person. Now the term person have been defined under section 231 to mean an individual, HUF, company, firm, AOP, or local authority, BOI, and every artificial judicial person. So basically, it tries to cover each and every person within the ambit of section 195. Then the next part is this person should be responsible for paying to a non-resident. Again, the term non-resident, when we look into it, so it says that it's a person who is not a resident, and for the purpose of 92, 93 and 168 includes a person who is not ordinary resident within the meaning of clause 6 subsection 6. Friends, we all know the definition of resident. When it comes to a company, it means foreign. So basically, in case of a company, it can be either domestic company or a foreign company. Foreign company have been defined as a company which is not a domestic company, and domestic company have been defined as an Indian company or any company which, in respect of income liable to tax under this act, has made and prescribed by. So basically, it's an Indian company that would be regarded as a domestic company. Not being a company or a foreign company, any interest, not being interest referred to 194 LB or 194 LC or section 194 LD or any other sum chargeable under the provisions of this act, not being income chargeable under the head salary, shall at the time of credit of such income to the account of the payee or at the time of payment thereof in cash or by issue of check, whichever is earlier, deduct tax at the rate in force. Now here the term what constitutes rate in force. This have been defined in section 237A to mean, as far as 195 is concerned, there are like various rates and rates in force is different depending on the different section. The definition is a bit different. For 195, it is defined as rate or rates of income tax specified in this behalf in the Finance Act of the relevant year, or the rate or rates of income tax specified in an agreement. So basically, DTAA rate are the rates which will be regarded as rates in force. Now, when we come to an explanation 2, where it clarifies that the obligation to comply with the T195.1 and make deduction thereunder will apply and shall be deemed to apply and extend and shall be deemed to have always extended to person resident or non-resident, whether or not the non-person resident person has a resident or place of business or connection in India or any other person in any manner whatsoever. So this basically explanation clarifies that the person who is making the payment, irrespective of his residential status, will be required to deduct tax if he is making the payment to a non-resident. This explanation was broadly brought in to cover indirect transfer. Indirect transfer are the cases where you have a a non-resident holding shares of an Indian company, selling this now this say I'll say X company, which is a France-based company, Y company, which is a Mauritius-based company, Y company selling shares of X company to Z company, which is again another French company. This transaction earlier would not brought into the tax. Now this is brought into the tax under section 9. At the same time, there could be have been a possibility saying that how can a non-resident comply with the TDS provision, and that is why they brought in this explanation to say that irrespective of your residence criteria, the moment the income is chargeable to tax in India and you're making the payment to a non-resident, the provision of section 195 will get affected and necessary tax withholding needs to be carried out. So this now when we discussed this point, we discussed who is responsible to deduct tax. Again, it's casted on the individual, and for which we have to go, or not individual, on the person, for which we have to fall back on section 231. This pay 195. First question is, friends, whether 195.1 will get attracted in when the payment is made to a foreign company whose poem is in India. So here, what is happening is, poem is basically talks about if a particular foreign company has place of effective management in India. Now, to determine whether the place of effective management is in India or not, there is set criteria which have been laid down. Presuming the company satisfies those criteria, and this particular foreign company, say XYZ Limited, is held that it has a poem in India. Now, say Indian company making payment to this XYZ Limited, whose poem is in India, towards say fees for technical services, which is chargeable to tax under the provisions of the Act as well as under the provisions of the treaty, whether this Indian company is required to withhold tax under 195 subsection 1 or not, or will it be required to withhold tax under section 194J? I would request your thoughts. I mean, either you can answer in yes or no, or they can participants can say which section the tax can be withheld. To proceed here, when we say that whether in cases where the poem is in India, whether the provisions of 195.1 can be get attracted or not, when we look at section 195. At that time, the provision reads as any person responsible to a non-resident not being a company or to a foreign company. So when it comes to a foreign company, that no distinction is made with respect to whether it is an Indian resident or not. So the moment while it is still continues in if it has a poem in India, it continues to be a resident in India. It becomes a resident in India, but it continues to be a foreign company, and hence when a foreign company happens to have a poem in India, Still 195.1 continues to be applicable to a view. Is possible to say that 195.1 will continue to get attracted. Second point to ponder is whether this particular provision will get attracted when I'm making a payment to NOR, that is resident but not ordinary resident. When we look at the definition, just a couple of minutes back when we saw 195.1, it says a non-resident, whereas not ordinary resident is a subset of a resident. In other words, first we will determine that whether the person is a resident or not non-resident. Once we determine that a person can be a resident, then we go get into another aspect. Is it a resident or is it a not ordinary resident? And depending if it's a not ordinary resident, then his income which is earned in India will be taxed and not his global income. But if it's a resident, entire global income will be taxed. Again, 195.1 talks about only resident individuals, non-resident individuals, and hence not ordinary resident, in my view, should not get covered under 195.1. Now, whether the payment by one non-resident to another non-resident is covered, which we discussed, which we a couple of minutes back, even the explanation is there in place to say that transaction between two non-resident could get covered, provided it is taxable in India. That is the main crux that one needs to look into it. Now, what is the time of deduction? Just like 194 sections, the domestic TDS provision, here also the time of deduction is either the payment or credit, whichever is earlier, except to government, public sector and public financial institution, wherein the tax withholding is required only on a payment basis. Friends, here one issue for consideration is in some DTAs, royalties or fees for technical services are taxed on payment basis and not otherwise. So only when the amount is paid to say Singapore entity, then that income will be taxed in that particular year, not before that. So the question which arises is whether the tax withholding is required when I'm making the payment, or again, I'll still be covered under payment or credit, whichever is earlier. The rationale for the argument which one can take to contend that I should deduct tax when I'm making the payment is that this income is going to be chargeable only on the payment basis. When I'm making a provision, this amount is not chargeable to tax. Having said that, and considering that 195 is a TDS provision, and the foreign company can claim a benefit of taxes deducted in India, either through foreign tax credit over there in their home country, or by claiming refund over here by filing tax return. Uh, in my view, while there is a possible view is possible that I should deduct tax at only on a payment basis because that is when my income is chargeable to tax. In my view, it's better to deduct tax when we are making the payment. Now, what are the rate that we need to apply? So over here, we need to apply rate in force as referred as we saw in a couple of minutes back, the definition. Second is 20%. This is basically coming from section 206 AA. This will get attracted when there is no pen or TRC is available. One point to ponder over here, rather it's proposed is section 206 AB by Finance Bill 2021, wherein an additional condition is prescribed that if the payee does not file a return of income for 2 years, then tax withholding will be a higher rate of tax withholding has been prescribed, which is goes to double of the tax withholding rate. In my subsequent slide, we'll touch upon 206 AB. Although this particular provision is still under proposal stage, finance bill is yet to receive president assent, or it has yet to become finance act. But for the completeness perspective, I thought to capture this in our presentation. What is the exchange rate that we need to apply? That is covered in Rule 26 of Income Tax Rules, which provides that we should consider SBI TT buying rate. Now, over here, I have come across cases where the taxpayer, what they generally do is they take either RBI rate or they do a Google and bring out what is the buying rate or what is the exchange rate. Now, over here, the exposure that this person or the taxpayer has is that the provision talks about SBI buying TT buying rate. When we do a Google search and take those rates, there is an exposure that the rates which we have considered may be less or more than the SBI rate. Consequently, if it is less than the SBI rate, we that is a possibility of short deduction, and thereby consequences could follow, which include interest also on the taxpayer. If it is on a higher side, no consequences, but there would be an additional cash flow which could happen on the taxpayer. So it's advisable that we approach the SBI, obtain the tax TDS rate, the TT buying rates, depending upon the country and the currency that we are sending the money, and accordingly compute the TDS liability. Now, in section 195.1, it covers income which is not taxable in India. Rather, it is excluded in the 195.1. Last year, before this abolition of DDT, this particular provision generally, whenever dividend was declared, it was always exempted, and it would hardly you would have come across people asking, or rather, you would have looked into it, the taxability of dividend even in the DTAA, since it was exempt. These are some of the sections which are specifically excluded from 195.1, and there are specific provisions where it governs the tax withholding. Now, on just a kind of a snapshot of this entire provision, whenever we are going to make a particular payment, we need to create a three basket check in a three basket in which basket it falls. Number one, it is entire payment is going to be taxed. Number two, it is not at all taxable. Number three, which falls between the two criteria. Some portion is taxable, some portion is not taxable. First and second, which I spoke about, it's very easy to move ahead. But when it comes to the third part, there is an additional step that we need to undertake. So before we get into this additional step, first step is if it's a fully taxable, then we should withhold tax on the amount, again, on the amount which is chargeable to tax, not on the entire consideration. We need to know what is the amount chargeable to tax. If it is not taxable, again, our life is simpler, tax is not required to be withheld. But when we say that no, it's partly taxable, we need to see, can we determine or not? If we cannot, then we need to apply to tax officer for determination of TDS. If it is determinable, then only on those part proportion on which the amount is chargeable to tax, that amount we need to consider. Friends, one point, there was a Supreme Court decision in case of AP Transcom, wherein Supreme Court have held that in whenever there is a composite contract, the taxpayer has to make an application under 195.2 to come out on what portion the tax needs to be withheld. This we generally come across. These are the, broadly speaking, the income which are taxed, or rather nature of income that a non-resident could have in India. One is business income, But business income would be taxed only if that person has a PE in India. Salary income, again, while salary income is taxable, certain exceptions are provided in the treaty as well as the act. Dividend income, now it is taxable. Earlier it was exempt in light of 1150 DGT. Now it is taxable. Treaty provides for the different rates. Then we have interest income, we have royalty and FTS, and we have capital gains. Depending again, the treaty number, article number which I mentioned over here in the presentation, may or may not correspond to all the treaties, because each treaty may have a different article number. So whenever we are referring to the treaty, we all need to check the whether it pertains to royalty, FTS. It might happen here. I'm writing is royalty as Article 12 and even applicable for FTS. In some treaties, we may find royalty. Article 12 governs royalty. Article 13 governs FTS. So it's quite possible. So one needs to look into it. This is not a sacrosanct article referencing which we have given, but it's a broadly speaking, this is the clause article where you will find this particular provision. Now let's understand this case study. I'm sure this I felt people may have come across. So say this is an X, a non-resident Indian. He owns 2 BHK. He may have purchased when he was a resident. Now he has left India for a couple of years, and because of which he is now a non-resident. He holds a flat in Khar, Mumbai. During 2021, he sold his flat to Y, who happens to be an Indian resident. Now, X have purchased this flat in say 2010-11 for 5 million, which is 50 lakhs. Now he is selling it for a consideration of 1.5 million. The question over here arises is whether section 195 will get attracted or 194 IA will get attracted. Section 194 IA covers the cases where immovable property being land or building have been sold for a consideration in excess of 50 lakh of rupees. So here the consideration exceeds 50 lakh of rupees. To that extent, that condition is satisfied. But can I say this particular provision will get attracted? Any thoughts on this? I think I'm just cool. So, it's what happens is just a second. The moment I click on share, I can't see the chat window. Okay, so I can't see anything. And yes, I'll move ahead on this. Whether the tax withholding is required under section 195 194 IA, the answer to this is section 195 will get attracted and not 194 IA. Because 194 IA is applicable when the payment is to be made to a resident and not to a non-resident. Second issue is this tax withholding is required on gross consideration or net consideration? As we discussed some time back, this we need to see on the net consideration amount and not the gross consideration amount, because that is the amount which is chargeable to tax. So in this case, we will have to consider index cost if it is available, or basically cost of acquisition needs to be considered, and only the net gain should be taxed. Now this is another case study. Sorry, but I'm hearing a bit of echo. I don't know why. So here, in this case, on 30th June 2020, I'm sorry, but I am still hearing echo. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on 30th June 2020, that is last year, X Limited, an Indian company, which was rather sorry, X Limited, a Australian company, had acquired 1 lakh shares of PQR, an Indian company. On 31st March 2021, PQR declared a dividend of 2 lakh 2 rupees, which works out to 2 lakh of rupees. Under India Australia DTAA, it gives right to tax dividend to both the countries, that is India and Australia, and the tax rate which is prescribed is 15%. So first and foremost is whether we should deduct tax or not. Considering that while under the Act it is taxable, but under the treaty both the countries have been granted the right to tax. So, friends, when both the countries are granted have been granted right to tax the income, generally source country being always taxes, and the resident country will allow the foreign tax credit. So, in this case, India, being the source country, will not forego its tax and it will levy the tax on X Limited, but Australia will give credit of taxes paid in India. Again, this will be subject to the foreign tax credit rule appearing as prevalent in Australia. Now, will the answer be the same if X Limited was a Switzerland company? To a certain extent, yes. But one also needs to look into most favored nation clause. Generally, some of the treaties do have these provisions, and this particular provision says that after entering into a DTAA with a particular country, if India enters into any other DTAA where a more benefit is given to such OECD country, sorry, after enters into any other country which is an OECD country, and a more benefit is granted to that particular country, then similar benefit would be available to this first company which whose execution was with whom we have executed earlier. To put it the other way around, say in this case Switzerland, India has entered into an agreement with Switzerland, but after that it entered into say Slovenia, which say it's a OECD country, and in Slovenia it provides a rate which is less than 10%, say 7.5% or 5%. By taking the recourse of MFNA, a taxpayer could contend that my taxation of this dividend should be at 7.5 or 5%, which as the case may be, and not 10%. So that, but again, this is not free from what I call litigation. But recently there was a decision, tribunal decision, where it has allowed application of MFN clause for the beneficial treaty rate. Now, this is again a common issue which I'm sure people would have came across, or at least would have read it. In case it's a software payment, and recently most of you may have read also a very good decision in favor of the taxpayer. It is goes like X company, which is an Indian company, is a distributor of Microsoft, a US company. Y Limited has entered into, again, it's a third party. Y Limited has entered into an end user license agreement with Microsoft. So you have three parties: Microsoft, X Limited, and Y Limited. Y Limited is the ultimate user. Microsoft is the owner of the software. Now, Y Limited wants to install Microsoft Office over here. So, and we generally, and say it's an annual license. Every year it pays on the license fee. Microsoft, what it does is it has a distributor over here in India. It tells its distributor, you give this particular software to Y Limited, and they are going to, we are already agreed, or they are going to enter into an end user license agreement with Microsoft. In terms of this direction, The X Limited, as the software it is, as it is, he just gives it, passes on to Y Limited. And the Y Limited also, when we see the agreement, he doesn't have any power. He can just install Microsoft Office. Doesn't have access to source code. He cannot change the software also. He has to use as it is. Now he is making a payment every year, and he's treating it as a royalty. The question which arose over here was whether this particular payment is liable to tax withholding or not. This matter have been going on in the judiciary for more than for 2 decades now. Recently, this week itself, as good as earlier this week, Supreme Court have rendered its decision. Before we venture into the Supreme Court decision, just one point which we need to keep in mind is when this particular decision was rendered, rather the year for which this particular decision refers to, at that point in time, there was this one particular explanation which tried to capture, right, tried to broaden the definition of royalty was not there. This is basically covered under explanation 4 to section 916, which was not there. It was introduced by Finance Act 2012 with retrospective effect from 1976. This decision runs into 200 plus pages, and if I have to explain the entire decision, it will take about hour or so. So what I've done is I've just took up on key aspects, key observations from the Supreme Court ruling. Lots of arguments were raised by the taxpayer and the assessing officer or other department. After hearing all those arguments, the Supreme Court have given this judgment. These were a batch of appeals, and it was, I guess, it was 87 appeals which are pending before the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court took one as a sample to conclude on this particular law, whether in such cases or whether the software payment, as it is famously known or commonly known, is it liable for tax withholding in India or not. Why I'm taking it for 195 is that 195 gets attracted when the payment is taxable in India. Basis this section Supreme Court decision, going forward, how our 195 will function in light of Supreme Court decision and explanation 9 is something that we need to keep in mind. This issue pertains to Engineering Analysis Center of Excellence Private Limited versus CIT, Civil Appeal number 8733 to 8734 of 2018. That is a sample case which Supreme Court has considered for its discussion purpose. Now, one thing is Supreme Court have created 4 baskets where, so if we fall, if we are, if the transaction that we are under consideration falls in any of these 4 criteria, then we can go back to the Supreme Court ruling and it will be applicable. This will have impact even to the past litigation or ongoing litigation also, because now we have a Supreme Court, as we know that Supreme Court being a land of law, though it should apply to other cases on the similar facts. Sure. So what are those 4 transactions where the Supreme Court ruling will be applicable? One is computer software, which I have purchased directly by which is purchased by directly an Indian resident from a foreign resident. So that is Indian resident have directly. So over here, in our case, it was Y, but I don't fall over here because I'm not the end user. So I don't fall in this criteria. Then I move on to the second thing. Resident Indian company acting as a distributor or reseller. So, okay, so this transaction, yes, it gets attracted because when the resident Indian company is taking it, this entity, so this entity is a resident entity. It is acting as a distributor or reseller of Microsoft this software, and therefore when this entity is making a payment to Microsoft, it is get this transaction will get covered under this particular Supreme Court. Third scenario is non-resident is a distributor. It is purchasing it from another non-resident. It is reselling. Now this reselling can either happen to a resident India distributor, or it could happen to an end user. fourth basket is so now on this Supreme Court had all those four cases which it said that their order is going to be applicable vis-a-vis those four cases. Now, after hearing both the sides' contention, these are the key Supreme Court ruling. I'll quickly take you through some parts of it. This presentation will be made available by the study circle. What Supreme Court held is that the provisions of IT Act can apply only to the extent they are more beneficial to the taxpayer and not otherwise, which I'm sure it was there that was the case even before that. Again, they said that you can't go back to the definition of royalty as covered in Income Tax Act when it is clearly provided in the in the treaty. They distinguished PILCOM. This PILCOM decision was basically applicable to sportsperson, and it majorly it was for Section 194 EE. So they have clearly said that these facts both are different, and that is why this Supreme Court, though it was a Supreme Court decision, it cannot be applied. 194 EE talks about any amount. It does any amount paid, whereas this 195 talks about any sum chargeable to tax. One issue was whether the particular provision, since this provision was not there on the statute, whether this particular provision can be applicable or not. To which the Supreme Court said that when the transaction had happened in 2000, it was 2 or 2-3, when this provision itself was not there, you cannot cast a liability on the recipient or rather on the deductor to deduct tax at that point in time. He wasn't aware कि उसको करना क्या था. तो इसके लिए they said कि भाई this cannot be a retrospective effect. Third thing is issue was एक important, उन्होंने passing जैसे remark जैसे उन्होंने कहा कि about this non-resident payer. This 195 is applicable only when the payer is a resident and the amount is being paid to a non-resident. Now that how far it will hold good, I have my own reservation, but this is a remark which the Supreme Court had made, but it may not be that what you call valid or powerful remark. When it came to OECD, now there was इसके बाद की slide कीजिए ना OECD की. हाँ. So इसके वाले. So OECD, so are most of the this thing commentary was based on OECD. India is not a party to OECD, and when it comes to royalty, जो मॉडल कमेंट्री में है उस पे OECD मॉडल कमेंट्री में जो रॉयल्टी के बारे में लिखा है उस पे इंडिया ने रिजर्वेशंस रखे हैं. तो एक आर्गुमेंट ये था कि भाई इंडिया ने रिजर्वेशंस किया हुआ है, सो DTAA की जो रॉयल्टी डेफिनेशन है should not be applicable because India as a country has a reservation to it. To which Supreme Court observed that while India has made a reservation, but the way they have made a reservation was I have my reservation, but what kind of reservation that you have, what is the position that you have was not clearly stated. Second thing, even after making the reservation, the basically India entered into subsequent DTAAs, wherein this particular provision, they entered into this subsequent treaty, where they were effectively using the same definition. So Supreme Court said that okay, fine, but then you have not changed even in the subsequent treaties if you had a reservation. Third observation was if you want to bring out any changes in the treaty, then it has to be brought in by way of a bilateral amendment. Since none of the things have been taken place, we are inclined to rely on the OECD model commentary and grant the benefit. So ultimately, they said that under the treaty, this income is not taxable as a royalty if it is a pure shrink wrap software. If it is not the case, then this will be applicable. One key aspect that we need to keep in mind is that in this judgment, they have relied heavily on Copyright Act,
they have went on to say that Copyright Act is the act which is governs the Copyright Act, and here the fight was whether it's a copyright, is it a right to use, is it a copyrighted article which is given. So the heavy reliance on Copyright Act. So whenever going forward we are going to make any payment, we need to check what is the provision of the treaty. Treaty will still hold good, and whether this we also need to keep in mind the Copyright Act. Krishna, next. Okay. Next. So friend, after like once we determine that this income is taxable, there is a concept of grossing up. We may have heard that foreign companies says that, look, I am least concerned about कि भाई आपके वहाँ क्या TDS है क्या है. I want whatever the amount that I am going to bill you, I want that much amount. So we are, the Indian company is not. I mean, Indian company has to gross up this amount. So 195A provides for this grossing amount. The question is whether multiple grossing up is required or not. Say for example, I have to pay 100 rupees and TDS rate is 10%. So gross amount for TDS purpose would be only 111.11%. But when it comes to presumptive taxation, views that grossing up should not be available. 192(1), which talks about taxation of non-monetary purchase, it is not covered by the grossing up provision. In respect of payment made net of tax, also the payer is under legal obligation to furnish TDS certificates to the payer. So here what happens is we are not having the pen. It might happen we may not have the pen number, or we may have the pen number. We are, as a deductor, we are required to issue TDS certificates in 16A. Oh, sorry, it's a different form. Next. Now here it's basically now we are getting into is lower withholding application, which will cover 195(2), 195(3), and 197. 195(2) talks about application by payer, 195(3) talks about application by payee, and 197 talks about by any person. So here this particular provision, it says that where the person responsible for paying any such sum chargeable under the act other than salary. So basically it gives the payer to approach the assessing officer to determine the tax liability. So can we approach for nil withholding, or it has to be approached for a lower withholding? Because the term somewhere it read was the issue which arose was whether I can go for lower withholding, or it has to be I can go for nil withholding or not. Judiciary is divided. I have listed down which are the cases where it have been held that the assessee can go for nil withholding, and there are the cases where the assessee courts have held that they cannot go for nil withholding. It can go for only the lower withholding. Krishna ji, next please.
Yeah.
So now again, whether this order which we receive 195(2), is it is it amenable to revision under 263, which was before this issue arose before BCCI when it was held here? No. In case is it appealable? So it says that yes, it is appealable only if tax is to be borne by the payer, and within 30 days of payment, appeal needs to be filed. Liability of TDS can be appealed before CIT appeal even without order from AO as per section 248, and even Chennai Tribunal in case of CMS India Operations and Maintenance Company, it has been held. Next. Now it comes to pay. So pay भी जा सकते, pay can also go for and apply for lower withholding, and the certificate will be issued basis the application made. Next question. Sorry friends, I'm just going a bit fast. Okay. Pay has to satisfy certain conditions to make an application under this particular section. The form is 15C for banking company and 15D for non-banking company. Which are those conditions? They are covered in Rule 29B. That is, i.e., the payee has to regularly file income tax return and it should be assessed to income tax. He should not have defaulted in respect of tax, interest, penalty, etc. So basically, you should not be a defaulter, tax defaulter. Additional conditions that are applicable for banking, non-banking company are you should be carrying, it should be carrying a business or profession in India through a branch for at least 5 years, and value of fixed assets in India exceeds 50 lakh of rupees. The certificate will be valid for the financial year which is mentioned over there. That is the validity of a particular certificate. 197, I'm sure most of us would have approached TDS officer to obtain 197. Generally, we ask for the nil withholding, depending on our case. If there is some tax liability, we request to adjust those TDS liability or tax liability against the rate, and some lower rate is granted to the assessee. So this the pay can also apply for no deduction or lower rate of deduction under 197. Again, this certificate will be applicable prospectively only, and payment of anything which is done before this certificate will not get covered. When we see the certificate also, we would have observed that generally it says the date of the certificate, that is a date from when they say that this particular certificate would be valid till the end date. That is how the certificate is generally appearing. Next, Kijini. This is just a kind of a bird's eye view for ease of reference to the participants when which sections get attracted and who can apply for this particular sections, which are the forms and which are rules that governs this particular provisions. 195.2, there are no specific format. We can just mention in a plain paper, but when it comes to 195.3, form 15C or 15D, as the case may be, needs to be used. Form 13 needs to be used for making application under 197. Next, Kiji. So the outcome will be AO will determine appropriate proportionate chargeable. Basically, will determine what is the amount that is going to be charged under 195.2. Under 195.3, certificate issued will be subject to certain condition as mentioned in 29B. 197, certificate will be issued by AO. It may given some conditions. Now 195.2 order is appealable before under section 248, whereas for order passed under 195.3 and 197, there is no express provisions under chapter 20 to file an appeal against such certificate issue. Generally, what people do, if there is some mistake, they approach the CIT request for amendment, and wherein the CIT asks to file an application to amend that particular amend that particular certificate. Again, they can approach filing of a writ also, that can be considered. Now, after we have understood like what section broadly, what section 195 talks about, let's move on to section 206AA. This section is not only applicable to resident payments, but even to the non-resident payments. This being a non-obstinate clause, it will override all the provisions, other provisions of the Act. And it basically gets attracted when you don't have, the deductor doesn't have a PAN number, or PAN is less than the amount of, is an incorrect PAN. Then this particular provision get attracted, and the person has to deduct tax at the rates in force, prescribed rate, or 20%, whichever is higher. So to take for an example, fees for technical services under the domestic law is say 10%. Under a particular treaty, it is 15%. And under 206AA, it is taxed at 20%. So here the tax rate would be 20% and not 10 or 15%. Even though treaty rate has a less, even though the domestic rate has a lower rate, still it would be 10%. Oh, sorry, 20%. Next कीजिए ना. Now, the question which arose over here is whether TDS as per rates specified in DTAA, will this get covered? So basically, can I say that 206 AA will override even treaty rate or not? This was the issue which was going on. Whether the TDS rates which is governed in DTAA, in light of 206 AA, will I have to go for it or not? To which a Chennai tribunal in case of Pricol held that 206 AA cannot override section 92 of the IT Act. Held that lower TDS as per the favorable DTA provision will be applicable and not the higher rate under section 206 AA. So this may be used when we are in appeal or we are going for a litigation. This can come very handy. Second is whether this treaty rate needs to be increased with surcharge and education cess or not. Here, when it comes to 194 or any of the domestic payments, we don't increase it with surcharge and education cess. That is not the case when it comes to section 195. In section 195, we need to increase it with surcharge and education cess. So the question arises over here whether this increase needs to be done when we are deducting tax under the DTA article or not. Here there are so finance. So the Finance Act, surcharge or education. So here, it was held that here the DTAA rate is inclusive of education cess and surcharge, and therefore one need not increase it further when we are going with this treaty rate. Second is this section 20% rate, which is governed under section 206 AA. Do we have to include it further or not? So over here.
Yes, now. Mr. Jagat, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
So, so here Finance Act actually got muted. So this 20%, whether one needs to increase it by surcharge and education cess or not. So this particular rate need not be increased by surcharge and education cess. The grossing up is required or not when we are applying section 206 AA. There are three views possible. One, grossing up is not required. Two, grossing up is required only vis-a-vis 206 AA. Grossing up is required in all the cases. Up next slide कीजिए ना. So in the next slide, we have taken it as an example how it will function. Say there is a rate in force is 10% as per DTAA. And the 206 AA में 20% रेट आ जाता है. तो हम लोग को ग्रॉसिंग अप कौन सी रेट पे करना है, 10% पे कि 20% पे. So in option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, in all the options we are saying कि मेरा सेम अमाउंट पेमेंट जा रहा है, बट अभी मैं 11% कर रहा हूँ तो मैं यहाँ पे 110% पे ले रहा हूँ. 21% is nothing but 20% and 25% as the case may be. तो बॉश लिमिटेड में ये इशू रेज अप हुआ था कि भाई क्रॉसिंग अप कौन से रेट पे करना चाहिए. तो वहां पे कहा था उन्होंने, इट्स अ बैंगलोर ट्राइब्यूनल डिसीजन, साइटेशन इज देयर इन द स्क्रीन, कि फॉर ग्रॉसिंग अप 10% rate should be considered. Next, 206 AA. Now, as per section 206 AA, subsection 7, This will not be applicable to a non-resident or foreign company in respect of 194 LC या तो any other condition payment which are prescribed payments. So basically ये 206 A में वो लोग थोड़ा exceptions they are carving it out. And what are those exceptions? So for which we have to refer to Rule 37 BC, wherein they have contained in detail what are the details and document that needs to be furnished for a non-resident to avail this benefit. First and foremost, which type of payment gets covered under Rule 37 BC? These are interest, royalty, FTS, dividend, abhi hua, with abolishment of dividend. Now they are also brought in within this ambit, and payment on transfer of any capital asset. In respect of this 5 categories of payment, Rule 37B is applicable. Once I say, okay, fine, this is applicable. Now what? Then I need to have name, email ID, and contact number of the payee. Deduct is resident address. Now this address will be of the country in which the deductee is a tax resident. So if I'm dealing with a Singaporean company, then I need to have Singaporean address. Government tax residency certificate is required to be obtained, and tax identification number, which maybe in Singapore, whatever the tax identification number is that needs to be provided. Here, a question that arises is TRC mandatory or not? So friends, there is an Ahmedabad tribunal decision in SCAP in case of SKA SCAP, wherein it have been held that TRC is not mandatory, but so far the foreign company provides any document which evidences that it is a tax resident of that particular company. In that particular case, it was a US company, and they had submitted form WN to showcase that they are a US resident. But this tribunal said, no, this may not be accepted. You need to give some document, though TRC is not mandatory, but you need to give some document to show that you are a tax resident of US. Next. There is another exceptions where 206 AA will not be applicable. This will not be applied in respect of payments that are made to a non-resident or foreign company, which if provision of 139A do not apply to such provision. 139A talks about PAN, requirement of PAN. Now this rule 114 AAB, which talks about shall not apply in respect of taxpayer who has during a previous year made investment in a specified funds. Now what is a specified fund is nothing but AIF, and it fulfills following condition. One is it does not earn any income other than the income from investment in the specified fund. Two, any income tax due on the income of non-resident has been deducted under section 194 LB. And whatever is mentioned in 37 BC, those details are furnished. That is name, address, TRC, tax identification number, etc. Which we just discussed couple of seconds back. If those informations are given, then 206 AA will not get attracted. Next slide, please. Now, this year, Finance Bill 2021 has proposed insertion of new section 206 AB. This will be applicable to when the TDS we are making under Chapter 17B, but it excludes few sections to which 206 AB will not be applicable. This is a peculiar section because here we need to check whether the payee has filed its tax return or not. And that is not for current year, but even for the earlier year. So basically 2 AY relevant to the 2 previous years immediately prior to the previous year in which tax is required to be deducted. How this practically is going to happen is something we need to wait and watch, because the payee may or may not be agreeable to part away with its acknowledgement to show that it has filed the return of income. So hopefully some kind of mechanism will be brought in. The time limit should have expired for 139(1), and the aggregate payment of TDS or TCS should exceed 50,000 or more in each of these two previous years. If all these conditions are there, so if they have not filed the return of income and 206 AB is getting affected, then tax withholding needs to be done at twice the rate specified in the act, or rates in twice the rates in force, or at the rate of 5%. So here a question which arises is, what will happen if I don't have a PAN number, and consequently, and I don't get that benefit, the relaxation is not there. So I'm clearly covered by 20%. In such a scenario, will I be required to deduct tax at 40%? Luckily, the provision the provision says that 206 AA and 206 AB, सपोज दोनों में से जो भी हायर रेट है वही अप्लाई होगा, अदरवाइज अप्लाई नहीं होगा. Otherwise, we may have been ready for another round of litigation if this was not done. Second thing is, if the particular person has a PE in India, that foreign company has a PE in India, again 206 AB will be attracted. But if it does not have a PE in India, then 206 AB will not have a PE, will not get attracted. Next question. Now coming on to multilateral instrument. Won't get much in depth into it because it's a separate topic in itself, but it also is relevant for our case. To briefly say what is this multilateral instrument, it is basically a BEPS, which stands for Base Erosion Profit Sharing action of OECD. They had started the work in 2015, and finally they have, when it comes to multilateral instrument, it has seen light, and in India it is applicable from 1st April 2020, and hence it's relevant for us. This basically multilateral instrument is an instrument which will now revise our treaty to certain extent. Here, instead of executing a new treaty, both the countries, India and the other country, will give their position on the particular action points, articles of MLI. MLI is a document in itself where each country can either reserve its right or it can access. But if it's a minimum standard, then it has to follow that minimum standard. So how this particular MLI is going to impact us? The treaty where India have stated that these are the treaties. Okay, so MLI contains MLI. India has to say which are the DTAA which gets covered by this MLI. This, when it comes to MLI, we refer it as CTA, covered tax agreement. So in respect of those CTA, the MLI provision will be applicable. Now, if the other country has also mentioned India as the part of the CTA, then the MLI will be applicable. If it has not mentioned, then the CTA treaty will not undergo a change. Best example is Mauritius. India-Mauritius treaty. India has mentioned Mauritius as a part of India-Mauritius treaty as a part of CTA. Mauritius, while it is a signatory to the MLI document, it has not mentioned India as a part of CTA, and hence India-Mauritius treaty, till the time Mauritius mention it as India as a part of CTA, will not undergo a change, and we have to rely on the India-Mauritius treaty. For the benefit of the users, for the benefit of the users, government have issued a synthesized text of DTAA. People are having a question that whether is it binding on the taxpayer or government or not. The answer is no. This is just for ease of reference for the taxpayer and the government. So one needs to look into the MLI document, and one needs to look into rather two MLIs. So one, India, what is the India's position and what is the other country's position before granting the benefit of the treaty. will this have be will there be any impact on dividend taxation? Yeah. So here, till before abolishment of DTAA, this question may not have arose. But now that dividend is now governed by even the treaty, MLI provision is very much relevant. MLI, when it comes to dividend income, provides that the person needs to be a beneficial owner of the shares for 365 days. Then only the treaty benefit would be available. In our case study 2, which talk about the dividend, in that particular provision, we had considered was the holding was less than 365 days, and hence the treaty benefit may not have been available in that case study too. Next, Kijana. Okay, so next, this is basically Form 15 CA/CB. Rather, when a particular Form 15 CA will be required, basically we have shown it by way of a flow chart. We need to see whether the payment is chargeable to tax or not. If yes, need check whether it's 5 lakh more or not. No, go for Form 15 CA Part A. Yes, then go for Part B, or plus check whether there is an order. If no, then you will have to submit 15 CB. If the payment is not chargeable to tax, go for Part D. No information to be furnished, and remittance, specified remittance. If you are making a specified remittances, then no information would be required. Next slide, कीजिए. So next two slides में हमने सिर्फ ये list down किया हुआ है which are the specified remittances. Next कीजिए. So this is available in the presentation itself. So I'm not taking you through each and every point. Next. This is a general process which is followed. A remitter, he will obtain certificate from the CA, say Form 15 CB. Then he will go for Form 15 CA. He will take the printout of Form 15 CB, CA, attach this acknowledgement. He gives it to his bankers along with A2 form, and bank makes the remittance from this particular basis this all these documents, and it also informs AO about this remittances. Next. Now, we heard about everything, that these are the things and everything which we need to keep in mind. But what will happen in case we do not comply? So these are the few exposure that the assessee will have. One is disallowance under 40, which is 30%, which is 100% of the expenditure. Disallowance of salaries under section 48(3). Under section disallowance under 58, then there could be interest implication. If we have not deducted tax, then we may not have filed the return. So there could be for sorry, I just took interest that should get attracted. There would be also penalty implication. There could be follow. Next, refund of taxes. Now, in case of a non-resident, sometimes we may have deducted taxes, and subsequently the contract would have get cancelled. But the taxes have been deducted. The party may say that I am not going to pay you back what you have paid to the government. I am going to pay you only what you have paid to me. So here there could be n number of factors. So as far as the amount which is taxes deducted over there, in respect of those cases, the government have come out realizing that there could be a genuine cases. They have come out with a circular where they have laid down the conditions under which the person can claim a refund of this additional tax, excess tax deducted. So these are the criteria. If you meet this criteria, you can make an application, online application with the TDS officer, and claim the excess refund of excess TDS. Next, so you can go through it subsequently. Now, well, the question which arises over here is whether interest on refund of excess TDS is available, to which Tata Chemicals and circular gives us information that yes, you can claim a interest on that excess TDS. Now, this is again refund of TDS pursuant to a favorable order. Okay. Next, I'm sorry. Okay. Now this is a key thing, which this basically, again, this list is basically to give an idea, a suggestive list. It does not provide, it's not an exhaustive list, but more or less we need to keep in mind these are the list of documents that we should have in place. Of course, agreement, invoice, no PE declaration, TRC if you are claiming a DTA benefit. I received a query from one of the participants saying that the payment they are going for the DTW, they are not going for the DTAA benefit, but for they are covered under the domestic law. Still, are they required to obtain TRC or not? The answer is no. TRC is required only if you are claiming a DTAA benefit. So far as you are going for a normal TT rate, or sorry, normal domestic law, then there is no requirement of DTAA. So no requirement of TRC. Third is declaration. Now here earlier we used to say that you take a declaration that he is a beneficial owner of royalty, FTS, dividend, the revenue stream, because more or less the treaty would talk about the beneficial ownership to avail the beneficial treaty rate. But now with MLI in place, there is an additional requirement which we need to keep in mind. MLI also has principal purpose trust. It also, we need to say that whether the transaction that we are looking at is the principal purpose is to avail the benefit of the treaty. If the answer is yes, the treaty benefit may not be available. So we need to have a declaration that this is not to take the benefit or solely for the benefit of the treaty. The main purpose transaction is not to obtain the treaty benefit. Second thing, a non-resident is not a resident in any other country. If it is again a resident in any other country, the treaty benefit may not be available. If it is a dividend, and if we don't have a supporting to showcase that the holding is more than 365 days, then we need to obtain an management representation. Otherwise, we should insist on obtaining a document which shows that when the shares were acquired, to convince ourselves that it is held for more than 365 days. This 365 days is applicable even when we are considering the capital gains. Exchange rate letter is required to show that it's SBI letter. Challan, so that we have appropriate taxes have been paid. In case any advice is being relied upon, then copy of that advice. And say certificate, basically 15 CB certificate, so that it will as for our own records. Next slide. So now these are few issues which I quickly take upon, not all of them, but few of them. One is whether a TDS is required in kind. Say for this, you may find generally in case of a media company where there is a concept called as barter transaction. Media, say it's a publishing house, he will give a space to a particular person in exchange of another person. So say for example, I am a publication, I am having I'm into say jewelry store, and I have entered into an advertising agreement with a print media entity. Now I have to the print media, I'll have to give them money towards use of that space, but I'll say, okay, you don't give me the money. I rather you give me a particular, say you are into the what do you call, you are into jewelry, you give me some jewelry example, a hypothetical example. So when there is a exchange of goods happening as a consideration, so whether the TDS will get attracted or not, to which there is a Supreme Court judgment in Kanchanganha Seafoods Limited 325 ITR 540, wherein it have been held that even a payment in kind will attract TDS provision. Second is, which we discuss, is whether the rates in covered in DTAA needs to be increased by surcharge and education cess or not. We have favorable decisions wherein they have held that no, we don't have to increase by surcharge and education cess because they are not surcharge and education cess is not a tax. That is a thought process behind it. But with this thought process, what will be the impact of SESA Goa? SESA Goa, it's a food for thought. SESA Goa says that education says is not a tax, and hence this is allowed as a deduction from computation of your business income. Can tax officer say that this not being a tax, you should increase it, surcharge? Education says needs to be increased. That is something which only the time will tell. But it's just a food of thought in light of the recent judicial pronouncement. Next, Kish. Service tax component, I'm skipping it. Reimbursement over here, if it's a pure reimbursement, then it should not get liable for TDS. But the question which arises over here is what will happen if I'm reimbursing which is in FTS or royalty in nature. So this generally happens in case of a cross charges. There is a intermediate holding company or rather financial company. It generally takes the services of different from different countries. Depending on the country who have availed that services, it will cross charge to it. When say Indian company is making payment towards this particular amount, which consists of this professional services undertaken, whether tax withholding is required or not. My personal view is yes, you should withhold tax. The reason being, what cannot be done directly, just because you are bringing it in another entity, that doesn't mean that it can be done. In other words, if I would have made the payment directly to that third party and I would have were supposed to deduct tax, just because now it is routed through my associated enterprise, it doesn't mean that nature changes. I have availed the services and hence tax withholding needs to be done. Tax applicability of 195 to presumptive tax. These are the favorable decisions on this account. Next. Okay, next. I'll take it later. Okay, so over here, whether TDS is required on payment made by Indian branch to overseas HO or not. TDS, so there are two, it's divided. TDS is required. We have circular and we have decisions to support it. And there are again favorable, which says may, and these are the decisions to support our case. It may be noted that Finance Act have inserted explanation to section 915, wherein it states that any interest payable to a PE in India, payable by PE to HO or PE of such an NR shall be deemed to be accrue or arising in India, and hence it might be now the interest would get covered. Next. So what are the key takes away? Quickly, we'll go through what are the key takes away. Payment to non-residents should be thoroughly examined from withholding tax perspective under the beneficial of provision of the Act or the treaty. When you're looking at the treaty, you should also look at the MLI provisions also. Payment can be remitted under the alternative mechanism, that is CA certificate route, if the assessee is fairly certain about the TDS application. In case of doubt, it's advisable that you approach the TDS officer and obtain the withholding order. Mitigate against severe consequences for non-compliance of 195. Ensure that you don't fall into the wrong side of the law. Tax withholding from cross-border transaction is now very critical, especially with Make in India and government being interesting, asking rather inviting lots of foreign company to set up base in India. It will now get more and more critical for us as a chartered accountant, for the companies who are coming into India, to ensure that there is no non-compliances. So friends, this is how I have this, before we go on a question answer session, I have also attached two annexures. One annexure talks about the TRC, second annexure talks about the cases on this, what we call pure reimbursement, both favorable and against, which you can go through it. I'm not right now taking through it. Now I guess we can go open for the question answer session. Krishna ji,
Yeah.
one which was shared with me yesterday.
Yes,
So
yes. Now,
one question I have already considered given on this thing TRC.
now I request Jayesh Thakkar ji after this
Yeah.
to share his screen and start the question answer session.
Sure. Okay, so now first question regarding whether 15 CB, ideally if the amount is not taxable we can, but
bankers generally tend to take a kind of a conservative stand, and they insist on 15 CB. Unless and until the company gives the 15 CB, they don't allow the remittance. What I've heard is they have a kind of a checklist, and they follow it to the T, and hence they are requesting it. So that is something purely on a bankers. Some banks do accept it without, even without if the transaction is not taxable, they do allow it. Next, in case foreign exchange remittance for services where foreign principal does not have any fee in India and income does not accrue or arise in India, what declaration documents here we should ask from client, and while issuing 3CB, what remarks should we write for non-application? So here, as I mentioned in my earlier in my slides, we need to have a kind of a management representation letter that it does not have a P in India, and also if it MLI is applicable, then the treaty is not the declaration would depend on which treaty it is, which country it is. We need to have no PE declaration, TRC. If it is TRC is applicable, then we also need to have that TRC also. Whether obtaining is TRC, I answered this question during my presentation, so I will move to the next. Remittance of fund for self maintained with attract TDS, not under 195, but there was some amendment which covers remittances above certain limit for tax withholding. We may get covered over there. Our client having office in Europe, salary paid for office staff who is working in Europe, TDS apply. Here we need to understand exactly under whose employment this office staff is. Is it under the employment of foreign European country? In other words, are we doing a reimbursement of salary expenses, or they are under the our employment? So here, in fact, we have an exposure of Indian entity. If we say that this salary person, or rather this employee on the payroll of Indian entity, we have exposure of Indian entity having PE in Europe, and consequently the various consequences could flow. But when it comes to 195, we need to see whether the income is chargeable to tax or not, for which you need to see what was whether the services were utilized for the purpose in India, and consequently is it taxable in India. So we need to have more information on this factually, then only we'll be able to answer. Next. I guess that's
That's it, sir. That's it.
Now there is no question.
No,
you
no
are
question.
mute like that. I can't hear you.
Okay. So if somebody want to ask
No,
any
Krishna,
question,
I can't hear you.
if somebody want to ask any question, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So if
Sorry,
anybody
sorry, I'll just increase it. Sorry. I have to. Hello.
yeah, if somebody
Yeah.
want to ask any question, so they can raise the hand.
Sure.
One hand has been raised, I think.
Sure.
So
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. We are going to exporting some goods to Europe actually. So Europe we require to appoint one of the staff who work for the Europe country. So that salary has to be paid. We are in India. Okay, we have established some branch or say liaison office in Europe. So whatever the orders come from Europe, we supply to. We have to appoint one staff there. So I'm talking about salary paid to that staff is taxable or not.
But is this salary will be paid by the Indian company, or will it
Yeah,
be
Indian company. Yeah, it is Indian company only, sir.
from India to there? Okay.
Yeah.
Now this particular person,
He's NRI. He's NRI, no residence Indian.
Agreed. He's an NRI. Here he's rendering services outside India. It is utilized also outside India.
He's in Europe only. He work in Europe only. He get the order from Europe country on Europe company only. So everything is done in Europe only.
So
But we are paying salary from Indian company.
prima facie, it should not get attract, because the payment which you are making it to that person this should not be taxable again. But you need to check the agreement between the
He's employed. He's going to employed in our muster actually.
yeah, of course, but what does the agreement says all about? Is there any option that he has
Employment
to sign
agreement.
into? Yeah.
Employee agreement, sir.
Yeah, agree, employee agreement. So here we need to see whether it can it covered under 192 rather,
Yeah.
not under 195. It can get covered under 192.
We have to get TDS on salary, pay to the Europe person.
Yeah. So for 192, it specifically excludes it. So you may
Pardon?
get covered under 192.
Under 192, I have to pay tax.
Yeah, yeah. So you may get
Yeah.
covered because 192 talks about amount paid to salary person.
Means he will get benefit of DTA.
Yes. Over there, we need to check the US laws. They do have foreign tax credit.
Not US. It is not a USA. It is a Europe country.
Europe. So whichever in Europe, whichever.
It is France.
So France, we need to check the domestic law of the France, the treaty also. Again, you need to check the treaty also, and then so it's not. You need to check the other things also. Also over there, what is the local laws over there?
I will mail you the details to your email ID.
Yes, yes.
Sure,
yes,
sure,
yes.
sure.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Next who had raised the hand, so can be unmute. Yeah, Arvind.
Yeah,
I have
Shitanshu,
unmuted.
yeah, Shitanshu has raised the hand.
Yeah, Arvind, just unmute Shitanshu ji.
Yeah, I have unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have one question. I've got a client who's an NRI is working in Hong Kong, but he's got some investment in India, and he says this investment in India, like mutual funds, the bank deducts the TDS tax at source and transfers to his NRO account. Now he wants to remit this money to Hong Kong, either maybe from NRO to NRE account, or maybe directly from NRO to his own account. So what are the consequences of 15 CA, 15 CB? I mean, since the tax is already deducted by the bank on a long-term capital gain basis, say 10% or 20%, depending upon the equity-based fund or debt-based fund. So if it is remitted to his NRO account, and from NRO he wants to remit to his own account in Hong Kong, is 15 CS required?
So I would suggest just speak with the bank. Ideally, legally speaking, a view is possible to say it should not be required, because what he is remitting is just instead of so before it received over there in his Hong Kong account, it just was parked in his this particular account. But some you need to check with the bankers if they insist, then you have to.
Some banks are asking he's got two accounts, HSBC and HDFC. HSBC is asking HDFC is remitting without 15 CB.
HSBC, whatever my personal experience is, they generally insist any foreign remittances, they insist on 15 CB. So it's purely on the bankers. So you need to check with the bankers.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next.
Next is, I think, Kinnari Mehta.
Yeah, Kinnari Mehta ji.
Yeah, sir, thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. One question I have is the payments that a hotel makes are, to make my trip, Go Ibibo, to the online, service providers. So would that payment require TDS or equalization levy tax, or what? I'm a little lost there.
So your view is equalization levy could get attracted, and recently there was an amendment proposed which says that if you are covered under 10% withholding, then you get out of equalization levy. So I guess here there was a discussion on these lines that if I make a booking through Make My Trip, or if I book it directly to the hotel. So view there is a school of thoughts which can be is if I make reservation directly or to say JW Marriott, example, or going on their website and making a reservation over there, then their case I might be required to pay EL, but over here I might get attracted to TDS. And I guess there was some amendment also on tours and travel related amendment. So it can get attracted to TDS. May not be under 195, but on in another section.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Next,
Sir, any citation here on
Oh,
the
it's a new provision, so we don't have case law to quote right now.
and any discussion paper that you're aware of, anything material to read, because I'm not getting, I am looking at the audit of the hotel. So I am not getting any material to understand whether this would be requiring TDS or equalization or both, or it's not something which is new, but I'm unable to find material of reference on whether TDS.
I let me check that out and connect with you.
Sure, sure. Okay, sir. Thank you.
next.
I think questions are over now.
Okay, okay, okay. So thank you, CA Jagat Mehta ji, for taking your time from your busy schedule and given the insights on the TDS from payment to non-resident. Now I request CA Jayesh Thakkar ji for give a formal vote of thanks to the speaker. CA Jayesh Thakkar ji.
Thank you, Krishna Kumar sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, sir. Today's our speaker, CA Jagat Mehta, sir, and the topic was TDS from the payment to the non-resident and the filing of 15CA, 15CB. The sir has covered all the important provisions with the explanation, case studies, and case laws in a very simpler and layman language. And he has also tried and answered the queries raised by our members. So hope all the members are been benefited with this session. So now on behalf of our JB Nagar CP Study Circle, I propose heartily vote of thanks to CA Jagat Mehta sir for accepting our invitations from his busy schedule. I will also thank our convener madam Seema Mehta madam, deputy convener sir Krishna Kumar sir, and all the members and for the patient hearing. And now I think we may close this session for the day.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. We are
Thank
closing
you.
the
Thank
session.
you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.